This is Anthony Lake, and I play the infamous Starfleet Ferengi on Star Trek Discovery Season 4, and you're listening to Trek Untold.
Hello and welcome to Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars. I'm your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. When the Season 4 trailer for Star Trek Discovery dropped, there was one thing everybody was talking about. And no, it wasn't how much Michael Burnham would cry this season, although I did see a lot of complaints about that in Facebook groups that I'm in, and man, they just do not stop. But really, it seemed like all the water cooler talk, or in this case since it's Star Trek, the replicator talk, centered around one thing. And that one thing was the long-awaited return of the Ferengi. When we all caught a first glimpse of that Ferengi in that very first trailer drop, everyone had questions. Why were his ears different? Why was his nose different? What's he doing in Starfleet? Are there going to be more of them? I had the same questions, and as longtime listeners of this show will know, I am a big fan and a big lover of all things Ferengi. So I did some hunting, and folks, well, today we're going to get some answers. Because I'm talking to the very person underneath all of that Ferengi makeup, Anthony Lake. As I learned during this interview, Anthony didn't just play the Starfleet Ferengi that we saw in that trailer, but he is in fact every single Ferengi you're going to see this season on Star Trek Discovery. And folks, that is a lot of costume changes. Most of Anthony's on-screen acting roles have been with a lot of heavy prosthetics and makeup, and his resume includes time in Defiance, Killjoys, The Strain, Departure, What We Do in the Shadows, a very not safe for work appearance he did in The Boys, and most recently in Chucky as a dead body on the Sci-Fi and USA Network series. My chat with this guest uncovered a lot of unexpected secrets regarding the Ferengi's makeup and costuming this season on Star Trek Discovery. And frankly, I think you're going to be just as shocked as I am when you hear about some of these things. So stick around, get ready to meet Anthony Lake in this very fun and interesting interview, and learn all about the brand new modern version of the Ferengi. But before we begin this week's episode, if you'd like to support this show, please don't forget to follow Trek Untold on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to get the latest updates and all sorts of other fun Star Trek related content. You can also check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/trekuntold, where you can support this show for as little as $2 a month. At higher tiers, you can check out the shows before they come out, know about my guests in advance, and even have a chance to ask them questions, among other benefits coming soon. Shout out to our sponsor, Triple Fiction Productions, who create 3D printed toys and prop replicas inspired by Star Trek. Their items come in all shapes and all sizes and are always amazing, but you're going to hear a little bit more about them later on in the show. If you're listening to us on iTunes or any other audio platform that allows for ratings and reviews, please leave us a 5-star rating and a positive review. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to us at youtube.com/nerdnewstoday and give the video a thumbs up and a comment. Doing any of those things help keep this show growing and allow me to continue bringing you awesome guests and great conversations every single week. Now, without further ado, let's beam in this week's guest. Computer, access interview file. And welcome back to Trek Untold, and now joining me on the other side of the screen is a performer whose face you might recognize, but not necessarily from his performances in Star Trek. Today we are joined by Mr. Anthony Lake. Anthony, how are you today?
Hello, I'm doing even better now that I'm talking to you.
Oh, thank you. That's very flattering, Anthony. I appreciate that. We'll see how you feel in about an hour from now.
I mean like vice versa.
Yeah, okay, fair enough, yeah. So, we got a few interesting Trek things to talk about here. As I mentioned at the start of the show here, you are really the first person to be portraying a Ferengi in the new Star Trek series. I think that's really cool, but we got a little bit of a road to get there before we start talking Trek. But that road always begins with this very first question, and that's, Anthony, what's your earliest memory of Star Trek?
Well, I just have to start off by saying I am an underachieving Ferengi because I am not a Trekkie. I was never interested in the world of Star Trek. Oh my
pearls.
God. I know, clutching my pearls. I was more of a horror fan. That's more my genre that that I'm into and still into. Hence the skulls behind me. But as a kid, my earliest memory is seeing the Ferengi because they had such a distinctive look to them. It was I never knew what they were called. It wasn't until years later till I got the opportunity to go for my fittings and then learn what the Ferengi are all about. So that's my earliest memory of Star Trek, is not knowing much about Star Trek.
Now, when we're talking Ferengi from that era, are you talking about like some TNG Ferengis, or are you talking some DS9 Ferengis, or something else? If you could tell.
I'm pretty sure like DS. I'm talking about like Cork and all those guys, and it's yeah. I'm pretty sure that's the era that they were from. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, all you Trekkies out there. I'm really sorry.
You nailed it. That's where Quark is from. That was a pretty Ferengi heavy show because of Quark and Armin Shimmerman. So that's really interesting that you kind of were intrigued by it because of this makeup that you kind of viewed as more like horror style. Because to me, when I think of like horror makeup, I don't know how much you know about like Voyager, but there's like a whole bunch of aliens who have this thing called a phage, and it's basically like imagine the abominable Dr. Phibes walking around in space. It's like a whole bunch of people like that.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing to kind of note. But let's get some background information about you real quick, Anthony. Can you tell us where you were born, what your parents did for a living, and what little Anthony wanted to be when little Anthony grew up?
Well, I was born and raised in Toronto, Ontario, and it's still my hometown today that I reside in. Growing up, I was an only child, so I was a little bit spoiled. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she met my stepdad early on when I was 2 years old. So, like, he was a baker, and she liked to cook, so that was a pretty much match made in heaven. And I always wanted to perform early on. Like it was always to make people laugh. That was my first memory growing up is making my family laugh first and foremost. I love performing. I love the arts. I didn't know if I wanted to pursue it back then because obviously I didn't know what acting was back then. So, it just it wasn't until a little later on that I was like, hey, I want to do this with my life, or maybe as a hobby. I don't know. We'll see where it goes.
I'm surprised you didn't go into the culinary arts, considering how much that was around you.
Yeah. Well, I think it's because like I was cooking up drama, as I would say, like meaning like I was like I'd rather perform than perform in the kitchen. I mean, like I'm quite the cook now, thanks to my husband, but like before then, it was non-existent at all.
Now, like, were you a theater kid when you were going to school?
Oh, no, 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 no theater for me. It was always I wanted to be in front of the camera, and that's still a fear that I have now. I have so much respect for theater actors. I like to have opportunities to go again if I have to. Whereas in theater, you only have that one chance. But what I learned in my training at Second City here in Toronto is that like if you screw up, the audience isn't going to know. So roll with it until you find your place again.
Now, you mentioned how horror movies were really like kind of your thing. So when did horror first, well, I guess, become your thing?
Uh, like acting, like I don't know exactly how it happened. All I know is that I was so intrigued by and fascinated by horror that my earliest memory was probably watching The Exorcist. I don't know why, because I heard a lot about it. I heard my mom and my aunt talk about it because they went and seen it back in the day, and they're like, "Oh, this was so good. It was hilarious to them." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then I watched it, and at the time, I'm like, I don't know why they found it hilarious. This is quite disturbing." But then, like over the years, like I watched all the Nightmare on Elm Streets and Friday the 13th and Halloween's, and developed my own taste with other cult films that weren't quite popular. You know what I mean? So yeah, and it's still in my life today.
So what would you say is your personal horror forte? I mean, do you gravitate towards the classics, the black and whites? Do you go towards like the gore films, more of the slashers? What are you into?
I'm not really into the paranormal. I feel like those are quite cheesy unless it's really done well. I did like the Conjuring movies. I really did like that. I'm more into like 70s and 80s cheese. Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and like the sleepaway camps and all those that are just they're just really bad that they're so good.
So after you're out of high school, I mean, did you go to a performing school? Did you go to a college or university to study acting more, or were you looking at other things at that point?
I actually started in the acting game pretty late in my life. I didn't, my mom, I wasn't a theater kid, or I wasn't, one of those kids that were fortunate to get into like commercials either on, that was that was the stipulation, the earlier, the younger you are, the better it is for you in your acting career. But my mom didn't really have like the means to seek out the best school for me, you know what I mean? And like in high school, like I did all the drama stuff, and like after high school, I'm like, do I really want to pursue, the college thing? And college wasn't in my future back then. And then it wasn't until later in life that when I was starting to work, I did retail, and then as the story goes, I was like, I'm so bored of my life. I can't do this anymore. Woe is me. And I'm like, you know what? I can't. I wanted to see if I can do acting on a more professional basis. And at the time, I was working retail as a manager, and then my best friend at the time, her neighbor was working as an extra on like TVs and TV shows and movies. So I'm like, that's interesting. And so I was talking to him more about it and like getting like a feel of it. And like, other than, doing like short films and like doing, training and stuff, I really had no knowledge of the industry whatsoever. I was pretty blind. It's amazing how many people want to be in the industry, but there's so much that goes into it behind the scenes that they don't. It's kind of overwhelming when you first get into it. And so like that's pretty much what I did. I started off as an extra just to dip my toe into that huge pond, which is very big but very small at the same time. And yeah, it just kind of like escalated from there.
Now, you mentioned a little bit ago about Second City. I mean, did you do some improv training there? Was that like, but basically, I'd like to know, I guess, where your acting education began and where it's ended.
Well, with acting training, like it's never the end. You're always learning. And like I went to Second City, the training center. There's only three in the world. There's in New York, Chicago, here in Toronto. And so that was probably the best place I can go to, because it has so much. There's so many great programs there. I did improv, I did stage just to prepare myself. I did audition techniques. And what was great about the teachers is that they're also working actors themselves. So they're still in the game, and they're still teaching people, their experiences with the industry as well.
Yeah, I feel like so often you get like teachers who are out there who aren't really giving you real world advice, real world applicable instruction. So it's really cool that you're actually getting things you can really use and not just, filling your head with a bunch of things that are never going to be talked about or discussed and ultimately won't make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a ton of those in in the world. And there's a lot of people. Well, that's what I mean when I said that my mom really didn't have like the intellectual means to know where to put me as far as like classes went. And so that's what I kind of had to learn over like my time in the industry, being an extra to start with, I mean.
Now, and the very first thing you were an extra on, was that Defiance?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really proud of it, because like it wasn't I got to do some pretty big stuff in it, like, and I was on set with some pretty heavy hitters.
Yeah, it's got to be really overwhelming to be like that, basically to be your very first job. That's a pretty high budget, very intense show, I'd imagine, to be thrust into.
Well, actually, my first job ever was on Degrassi.
Nice,
but
nice.
but Defiance was like my second job, and it was very like it was a big show. Like it was a big budget. Like shooting
Oh,
the pilot, they shot it like a movie, and then like they got picked up, and I was typecast early on to be a very fabulous hooker in the need want. And so I was always in those bar scenes with Grant Bowler and Julie Benz, and it was just a really great experience. And I was really sad when it got canceled, because that was a great show to be on, and I miss it. And years later, being on other productions, people still remember me, like, oh, you're the guy with the nipple pasties on that show. I remember you still. So it's nice to be remembered that way.
so I hope you got some 8x10s of those nipple pasties, because that'll sell. That'll make you some bank.
Well, unfortunately, I wasn't able to grab those.
Ah.
I know they were really great. They were like stars, but they were like sequins. I'm like, damn, you couldn't have saved me those.
So, being on this show, you were there for a while, I believe, too, right? What did you learn from there?
A lot. There's a lot of terminologies that go with, just being in the industry. And, what people probably think of most is like, oh, hit your mark, say your lines properly. But there's a lot that goes hand in hand with all that stuff, like blocking the scene and like, doing rehearsals. It's like kind of like doing a play in itself in a way without the huge scope of audience in front of you.
I believe not too long after Defiance, you went over and started working on The Strain for several years, right?
Yeah, that was a completely different scenario.
Yeah, because that was like, if I recall, that was your first time actually dipping your toes into prosthetics, right?
Yeah, that was yeah, it was very overwhelming, but it was very exciting time at the same in the same in the same time because it was I didn't know what was I was getting into, and me being a horror fan, that was always kind of like a dream of mine to like wake up and be something gross and disgusting and scare the shit out of people.
Well, that's how I wake up every morning. But first time ever doing prosthetics, I gotta know.
Well, that's how everybody's been waking up since lockdown.
Yes, true, true. But yeah, so this was like your first time ever doing prosthetics, right? Had you ever done it before in any independent things, or was this just pretty much, here we go, you're gonna go into the deep prosthetics now?
I was thrust deep into that. Like that was the first time I've ever done that. So it was really, really exciting for me. They wanted a whole bunch of people that were willing to shave their head, and I already had my head shaved. It's just easier to navigate life with a bald head. You don't have to do much. You roll out of bed, and they're like, "Great, we like that." And they wanted people who knew how to move their body, and we got choreographed with a dancer professionally who's worked on everything in Toronto. He was actually Pyramid Head in the Silent Hill movies. So that
That's
was
really
really
talk about creepy.
it was yeah, but it was really exciting too. But yeah, we had to go, we had to train, we had to do this whole like neck thing and move slowly. It was interesting, especially since I was kind of like fresh off the boat, so to speak, and I didn't know much about this stuff.
The first time you sat in that makeup chair, and maybe even if I back it up, the first time you had to like do a mold, were you claustrophobic? Were you okay during the whole process?
Well, back then it took my first application ever, it took 3 hours to do. I didn't have to do a mold because they were, the special effects artist Pat Baxter, who did my makeup. He's a legend. Like he did like the Evil Dead movies, and like it was just it was great. And now he's like doing prosthetics all the way in Japan now. But he's like going back, and he also did like something for Ghostbusters Afterlife, and he spoiled some stuff for me because he showed me some pictures. But yeah, it wasn't a mold. It was just a latex piece that went over like my brow, and then the rest is just like painting and airbrushing. But that first season they were just kind of like feeling their themselves out, and it was like trial and error. And by fourth season it took maybe 45 minutes to do an application, given the fact that the prosthetics wasn't too stubborn in the morning.
I've spoken to a lot of actors, even ones who play like pretty major roles on Star Trek, and after a while they say it gets pretty tiresome doing the prosthetics. But you basically have made a career of it. So just talk about the strain in particular. How did you keep yourself sane during all of that makeup time?
Well, that was my favorite part, was like waking up early in the morning and heading into that makeup chair and just shooting the shit with all these amazing makeup artists who have made their mark in the makeup industry. And it's just been that was my favorite part. A lot of actors hate it, and I've talked to a lot of actors who are like, no, it's torture, I don't want to do it again. And I'm like, okay, well, whatever, you complain too much. But I love it. It's like one of my favorite things to do. That's why I love Doug Jones so much, because he's made a career of turning himself into like anything and everything. You know what I mean? And like I look up to that man, and I think like he's so lucky, because that's what I want to do. Like I just to and that's my dream as an actor, to like, and to like sit there and like transform the metamorphosis into something completely different and like look in that mirror and be like, whoa, that's not me. And like it helps you immensely to step out of that acting box and perform even more. So it's a lot of fun. The cold wasn't. Like when we were doing the strain, that was the one thing I didn't look forward to because the majority of the time it was a lot of night shoots, you know, from sundown to sunrise and being out there in the cold, and the crew were just like troopers also, and just that was the hardest part. And by the time we got to the fourth season, we were kind of lucky because they were shooting the last season during the day for the exteriors, which was a little bit better.
Yeah, I feel like the one thing is if you're going to try and make it in the industry as a person who strictly does prosthetics or wants to focus on prosthetics, you're going to have to learn a lot of patience.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the patience is key.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about Doug Jones later on because I get the feeling there's going to be a lot to talk about with him, and I'm glad to hear that his name's already coming up this interview because that's awesome. But you've had a bunch of roles, but arguably I think the most not safe for work role we're going to talk about today would be then probably that I've ever discussed in this show, and I don't know if I'll ever top this one. But you were in The Boys,
No
and
pun
you played.
intended. Bum, bum.
Yeah, you were in The Boys, and you played the porn version of Jack from Jupiter. He's kind of like Martian Manhunter in their world. Man, this is already just getting NSFW, but I have questions. I don't even know where to begin. I like being on YouTube and not being demonetized. So, what can you tell me about the porn version of Jack from Jupiter? Because that is an unforgettable moment. Let's just say.
Yeah, it was. And when I first got the breakdown from my agent, breakdowns are pretty much like from the casting that says, "Oh, I need an actor that fits this and this," and the agent is like, "Oh, well, I got this person." And my agent, I woke up one day and my agent emailed me saying, "Oh, they need somebody who's bald, thin, tan, lean, and he's willing to do nudity." And she's like, "This is pretty much you." Are you? And she's like, "Are you willing to do this?" I'm like, "Well, I mean, like, how much nudity?" And she's like, "Well, there's a good chance you might need to do full frontal." And I'm like, okay, let me think about this for a second. And then I was like talking with my husband about it, and then my best friend who's also an actor, and then my actor's like, "Are you stupid? Like, it's The Boys. This is a big TV show. Like, if you don't do it, I'm gonna shave my head and I'm gonna do it." I'm like, "Okay, okay." And so like I was like, "Okay, I'll do it." And then just sent a bunch of like safe pictures to my agent, and like, you know, all the stuff, and just so they can send a casting. And then casting is like, "Okay, great, we love the look, can he come in for an audition?" And I'm like, "Yes, for sure." And then the next day I went to the audition, and then you know, it was I just had to do um one of the lines. And the casting director was like, "Okay, we're going to do this again," because the first time I read it, when my agent sent me the little clip, I was like, "Well, I don't get this. Is this like supposed to be legit porn? I don't get the concept of this." And so when I went to the audition room and the casting director told me to do it again, she's like, "Okay, you gotta do it, but do it really bad." I'm like, "Okay, like don't quit your day job bad." She's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, that." And so we did it again, and like I said the line really over the top and just added a couple moans and groans in there. And then, and then once that was done, everybody laughed in the room. And I'm like, "Oh, that was fun, guys. Thanks." And then I opened the door, and the secretary at the desk just looked at me and smiled. I'm like, "Thanks. Have a good day." And then, you know, the rest is history.
I don't think the rest is history. I got to talk more about this thing. I mean, you're doing this scene here. It has to be intimidating. I feel like it'll be such an intimidating thing to do, and not only that, to have to be so vulnerable in that moment because you are basically stripped down to the bare necessities. So, I mean, on shoot day, what is that like for you?
Well, it wasn't my first rodeo being nude on a TV show before. I'd done, you know, a couple others. So I kind of knew what I was getting into. I mean, the last one that I did prior to that, it wasn't really a great experience. So I did come into this with a little bit of hesitancy, but like shoot day, you know, it was I couldn't be more comfortable. They made me feel so comfortable. But prior to shoot day, I actually had to go into the studio to, get my fittings. And then I had a photo shoot with a couple of the other foreign guys, the guy who played Homebanger and Horn Deep. We had our own little photo shoot because we had our own DVD covers that were never used in the final episode. So I would like to get that eventually. So we had to do all those prop shots, and the day of shooting, I think I spent more time in the makeup trailer getting airbrushed orange than actually being on set and doing that scene. But yeah, I remember the poor makeup woman. She actually we had to go into my trailer and actually she had to finish airbrushing my butt with the airbrush, but it was totally cool. She was totally fine. We were totally comfortable. And then once I got into all my Jack from Jupiter gear, I was like, yes, it's go time. And then I was on set with 4 other guys that were troopers in themselves. You know what I mean? They had to pretty much stand there, and then I was right in the middle. And then I think we did, I want to say probably 8 takes, and they were all different. There was one that you've seen in the final cut. There was one with me just wearing the cape, and then there was one that was when I was wearing everything: the cape, the boots, the booty shorts, everything. And so just to give Amazon that little bit of a insurance in case it was too much. But yeah, it was great, and nobody made me feel bad at all. And the cool thing is that we shot it how the panel was in the comic, which was really fun. And yeah, if they ever asked me to do it again, oh yeah, like yeah, I would do that again.
I mean, are you surprised that that moment has become pretty iconic? I feel like to that show. I feel like in terms of the circles that I'm within, I didn't really see a lot of stuff for the boys, like not really a lot of memes, things like that. But that's the one thing I knew about without even seeing the show. At that point, I mean, that thing has become basically a meme. Were you expecting that to turn into that?
Uh, Kinda, because it's one of those Easter eggs where you blink and you miss it. But I know hardcore boys fans who also read the comics, who watch the show religiously, would see that and blow their mind. And I like that. I like that's a nice way to be remembered for.
I like how that sentence included hardcore boys and blowing their mind. So congratulations on doing that.
So it's a marriage. You have to marry the two.
That takes talent. So another show that I'm a really big fan of is on FX. That's What We Do in the Shadows. I like that show a lot. I didn't think I'd be still in the vampire phase at this age of my life, but it's such a great show. It's so hilarious, and I was really excited to see that you were on it as well. And
Yeah.
you were Blavglad. I believe I'm saying this right. Blavglad the Exsanguinator.
Blavglad the Exsanguinator.
Yeah, you said it much better than I do, of course. So, I mean, how are you enjoying your time being a vampire now?
I mean, if I could be a vampire, porn star, superhero, hooker, uh, combine all the two, I would be that would be amazing. But I feel that's my niche. I'm either the porn star, hooker, or the vampire, and I'll take it. And it was really fun. You know, being around other comedians, especially ones of that caliber, they're all amazingly talented, and all they did was improv that first time that I was on the show. And Nick Kroll was on there, and he was nothing short of but amazing, and he was funny, and it was where I wanted to be.
I mean, how much of that show would you say is actually scripted versus how much is improv?
Oh, all of it's scripted, but they do their lines, they do what's written down, and then everybody kind of exaggerates and does their own thing. And their director will come over and say, okay, do you want to do one more for funsies? And then they'll do something completely random, and it was really great. And so to be back on season 2 again, that again, cast was amazing. And then before the winter break, we finished season 4. I'm actually 2 different people in season 4.
But I'm pretty sure we can't talk about that, or else I'm going to be losing all my blood, and that's going to be at the hands of FX.
No, but like one's pretty funny, and I'm in pretty heavy prosthetics, and it's hilarious.
All
And
right.
then back to being Blavglad the Exsanguinator again, which is really funny. I like how they keep on bringing Nick Kroll's vampire gang back as sort of like a little, yeah, you're here too.
Trek Untold will return momentarily. Trek Untold is brought to you by Triple Fiction Productions. If you're a Star Trek cosplayer looking for props, or toy collector looking to spice up your shelves, Triple Fiction Productions has you covered. Triple Fiction Productions produces affordable and unique 3D printed Trek-inspired products from the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and the movies. You can expect the same amount of care and attention to detail in any of the items in their catalog, whether it's a prop replica for use in a fan film, or a part of a cosplay, or accessories and playsets for figures from Playmates, Migos, or Diamond Select. Own your very own tricorder or phaser rifle with working lights, the bridge of the Enterprise E for your Playmates figures, or any other item from countless species and ships from the Star Trek universe. All products are 3D printed in the USA and are constantly evolving and improving based on fan feedback. To learn more about their products, visit them at triple-fictionproductions.net or on Facebook at facebook.com/triplefictionproductions. Triple Fiction Productions, taking Star Trek where no 3D printer has gone before.
Hi, I'm Armin Shimmerman.
And I'm Kitty Swink. 17 years ago, I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. I didn't know it at the time, but I had a 4% chance of surviving 5 years.
As her husband, I was very scared.
But he never let me see that. You are a rock.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pancreatic cancer is the third leading cause of cancer-related deaths in the United States, with a 5-year survival rate of just 10%.
We want it to be much higher.
Much higher. It's 6% better when I was diagnosed, but not high enough. More than 60,000 Americans are estimated to be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2021, and more than 48,000 will die from the disease. Because symptoms are often vague, it can be hard to detect.
Like the rest of the world, the Star Trek universe has been struck repeatedly by pancreatic cancer. Not only those of us that work on the show, but our fans around the world as well. It is why we came together with so many others to work with the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, the leading patient advocates committed to fighting the world's toughest cancer.
PanCan is working hard to create better outcomes for this devastating disease through its groundbreaking research in early detection and better treatment options.
PanCan drives progress by funding life-saving research, providing personalized patient services, and creating a community of supporters and volunteers who will stop at nothing to create a world in which all pancreatic cancer patients will thrive.
You can help support their important mission by donating at pancan.org today. We donated. Won't you do so too?
Please, make it so.
We now return to Trek Untold.
All right, well, Anthony, let's beam into our Star Trek discussion here. And, my big draw for you was that you were the Ferengi, but I didn't know you actually played another character before we got to the Ferengi. So let's kind of back things up for a second. You were seen in, I think it was season 3 of Discovery, Unification Part 3. You were one of the spectators on Navarre. So this is your first time, I assume, in Disco. So how did you get cast into this part?
Again, they like people with bald heads.
That's the secret.
Yeah, that's the secret, be bald. And I always wanted to be on Star Trek. It was like ever since it came here to Toronto, everybody wanted to be on it. And like, I always want, like, even like with the audition circuit, like I could never be on it. And they were looking for people who were bald and wanted to be like a hybrid with the Vulcan and the Romulan, which I thought was really,
Romulan.
Romulan. Sorry, my non-Trekkie code is showing. We did that scene, and I think we shot it in 3 days. I want to say 3 days because it was a long scene, and like I had to come in for, I'd say, 4 times just to do a fitting, which is completely natural. And if you're a cast on Star Trek, you need to be fitted quite a good deal. Just even like anybody that you see wearing even those disco jackets, like I guarantee you they've been in fittings at least 4 times for that jacket, because everything's very meticulous and everything needs to be fitted like it has to be like chef's kiss, like mwah. And so like it was a good like 4 or 5 days fitting into that. And so it was like a, and then again prosthetics, like simple brow piece, and then the ears, and then the eyebrows. It was really fun, but like all the stuff that like I was in, they didn't show it. They didn't show it because like the scene already went along as it was with Soneqa's big monologue that she had, which was the big focus. And when you're on Star Trek, they like angles. They like to shoot every single angle that they possibly can. And so like a lot of that scene with us, the hybrid spectators, didn't really make it.
So, I mean, what can you tell us about what was left on the cutting room floor? I don't know if you're allowed to talk about this, but I assume it's safe to discuss it because it's probably going to be in the Blu-ray. But I mean, what was ultimately left on the cutting room floor?
I mean, there was one scene where like one of the lead actors looks to us for, I guess, approval in a way, and we just the rest of us were kind of like like split on the decision on what Soneqa was saying, and there's one point where we got up and we started yelling at each other, and it ended up being really goofy because when I'm in those situations, I will yell like stupid shit at my fellow like actors, and just to say just to yell things, and then they'll dub it with like the alien speech and stuff like that. But like that wasn't really, from what I seen of the scene, it was really quick, and they didn't really show a lot of the spectators, which was really unfortunate because each one of us that they worked on looked amazing.
Yeah, that's the one that you can say about Discovery. I know a lot of people like to pick on it, but the makeup job, whether you like it or don't, it's still pretty amazing. It's still some pretty great work. And
Yeah.
even
We will touch on the decision making on the makeup.
oh, okay, yeah, we're gonna get there I think in a few minutes. But just one last thing about being the Vulcan Romulan or the Remulan hybrid, if you will. Nothing is that simple when it comes to being in the makeup chair, and even if it's just like simple ears, it's gonna still take you a while. So, how long was your makeup process being this type of a character?
Not that long. I'd say maybe probably like I guess 35 minutes to like 40.
That's a
It
cakewalk
depends.
for you.
Yeah, which is like nothing for me. Like you just had to glue on the brow piece and the ears, and again, it depends on like how finicky the piece actually is. Like you got to make sure those edges are really smooth.
Traditionally, Romulans and Vulcans, they all kind of have this like bowl cut hairdo with the really pointy sideburns. But you were bald in your scenes, right? So I mean, was there ever talk of having a wig on you?
No, never.
Always on
Uh,
natural.
all natural. I think they wanted, in terms of hairstyle, they wanted some diversity. From what I remember, I think there was one person who was sporting something similar. But again, like it didn't didn't make it. But yeah, there was no talk. I think they just wanted like all different looks across the board, and they got it.
Right, well, let's fast forward now to season 4 of Discovery, and you return this time as a Ferengi, and not just any Ferengi. You are a Starfleet Ferengi officer, which is pretty rare, and you're also, I think, the first Ferengi we've seen on screen in a live-action way in the entire time New Trek has been around. So that has to have been really exciting. I mean, was this a role that they came back to you for, they auditioned for? How did this one come together?
So again, I underachieving Trekkie here because I'm not one. When I got this, I didn't know what I was walking into, of course. I didn't even know what I was doing until like when it comes to the prosthetic process and the wardrobe process, they all dialogue with each other, and they talk about like, oh, who's difficult, who's easy to work with. And like from what I understand, they wanted somebody a little bit smaller in stature compared to everybody else, and I'm really small. I'm 5'6", 127. I'm a pretty small dude. So the wardrobe suggested me to do it, and my agent got in contact with me, and she's like, hey, do you want to, is this something that you would be interested in? Because it's quite the commitment. I'm like, yeah, of course. And so I went to my first fitting, and again, it was a long process just to even get. I think they fitted me for 2 jackets the first day, but like for those 2 jackets, I think I had to come at least 4 or 5 times, which was a lot. And I don't know what their expectation was, but I know that I think this is not what they said, but just from feeling the season out, I think that they wanted to kind of test out the Ferengi and introduce the Ferengi back into the fold, uh, without actually putting too much emphasis on them. Maybe just show a Ferengi here and there and see how like the audience respond to it. And man, when that trailer dropped, there was a lot of responding.
Yeah, I was one of those people because I was like, oh my god, they finally brought the Ferengi back. It's about time. I was super excited to see this because I'm a big fan of the Ferengis. Anybody who's listened to the show knows I've had a bunch on already. So yeah, I was like stoked when I saw that one screen grab. I know that thing went, I feel like, more viral than anything else in that trailer, which is so cool to be talking to the dude who was in that part. So yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about the outfit. We'll get into the makeup in a second, but you mentioned about the fittings, that kind of thing. And I've heard stories from different folks who have been on the show who have said that, getting those outfits, there's all sorts of different secrets about the thing and getting it, to fit them right. How was it for you? Because we haven't talked to anybody who's worn those outfits just yet. And just kind of a little more, preface it a little bit better, I guess. I've spoken to folks like Conrad Coates, who I think you might have ran into while you were on Defiance. And he was telling us how, like, underneath their outfits, they're actually wearing suspenders to help keep the pants up because they can't wear belts in the future, apparently. So I'm just kind of curious to know how the outfit fits, how it comes together. Is it comfortable to even wear?
Yeah, some are more comfortable than others. I had a grand total of, I'd say 9 or 10 outfits for
Wow.
me. Yeah, yeah.
Just for you.
Just for me. I want to just emphasize by saying every Ferengi that you see this season is me. um, it's yeah, I think one of them we had to shelf because there wasn't enough time doing it, but it was this beautiful jacket. I don't want to say too much because I want to wear it maybe in future seasons if they have me on. But yeah, they had about 9 or 10 different outfits, and I don't. Obviously, Conrad's experience was the suspenders. I didn't have to wear the suspenders. They actually had a little Velcro piece, like where my belly button sat and where the pants ruck up, and like on the inner rim of the pants, it would just Velcro together, and I would have like little stirrups on the bottom of my pants. So when I put them on and I put the boots on, it would just be very very straight legs. There's no curvatures on anybody.
No, the future is very linear, apparently.
Why couldn't there be a sexy Ferengi with a little bit of a booty? I don't understand.
Well, we haven't seen the Moogies yet. We haven't seen the Lady Ferengi, so maybe that'll change.
Yeah, definitely.
So we talked about the outfit, but let's talk about the makeup. And this is what I'm really, really interested in because, again, we've spoken to a lot of Ferengis. We've heard what the makeup has been in the past. I got to know if things have changed. So talk to me about, I guess, the whole process of getting the mold, if there was a mold, and how long it took you each day to get all those different pieces on. I mean, there was probably a lot of pieces to this, weren't there?
I'm about to reveal something very big to you and a lot of the fans that they probably don't know. It's not pieces, it's actually a very detailed latex mask.
I don't believe you. That's amazing.
Yeah. It was just simpler to do with, Doug and all his pieces. It takes a village to apply his pieces, and I've seen it myself. Like, man, he just like sits in that chair, closes his eyes, and just hopes it to be over soon. But with me, first of all, like that shot in the trailer, nobody was expecting them to do close-ups on me, and you can kind of tell by how my eyes are kind of sunken in that trailer. If it was just one piece, they would have done a better job, and they probably would have like shelled out for the molds and the pieces if they knew that they're going to do close-ups on me. But they weren't supposed to do close-ups on me. At least not yet. So yeah, and so it was just easier and a lot more, it's less time consuming to kind of like put that on and then take it off, and all they have to do is just do a little makeup around the eyes. And well, like I said, like I have they made about 9 or 10 outfits, and so there's certain days where I had to get more paintings done to me than others, and
Okay.
like I would have to get my hands and nails painted for certain things.
But without giving too much away here, because again, we're doing this right now. We're doing this interview right before the next part of season 4 airs, so we have to be a little bit careful when we're talking here, folks.
Yeah.
But in terms of the teeth, that's something that the Ferengi are known for, is their jagged teeth. Did you have to deal with any of that? Because I can't really tell from a lot of the shots I've seen you in so far.
Nope, no
No
teeth.
teeth.
No
Wow.
teeth. It's my teeth, my eyes. And I know that I remember when I seen the Ferengi, they had those like sharp little baby teeth. That's the one thing I remembered them for. And yeah, no teeth, no contact lenses, just something easy peasy, lemon squeezy, and it just made things a lot easier on the makeup department's part. And even if they had to, you know, call me in like at 5, 4 in the morning to put all these pieces on, I do it. Like it's like I love doing that stuff, and we got picked up for season 5, so maybe they might shed a little bit more emphasis on the Ferengi next season. I don't know.
I hope so, and maybe they've gotten rid of the teeth. Maybe the Ferengi finally got some dentists on Ferenginar. So here's hoping that that's the case.
Well, that's the big thing, and a lot of people are having a tough time dealing with how the Ferengi is now looking. And like us as humans, like we didn't always look like this. We've evolved, and so like I think it's hard for people to wrap their heads around that. Even alien species can evolve too. And in those Star Trek seasons that were a lot earlier, from what I've been hearing, that the Ferengi were kind of built on this group, a group of individuals that is very derogatory, and laying on some very heavy stereotypes on that that group of people. And I just want to say, like, with the show like Discovery, like that's so diverse and accepting, I think if we went back to the old ways of the Ferengi, I think that would just be a contradiction, and that would kind of take away from the diversity and the acceptance. Why go back?
It's interesting that you brought that up, because it's something I actually did ask Armin Shimmerman on the episode where I had him on a while ago, and that was like, are the Ferengi the stereotypes of Jewish people? And his response has always been, and he'll say this at conventions and all sorts of other places, and he said it on my show too, how if he goes to, let's say, Australia, they'll be like, oh, are you trying to be like the Chinese stereotype? Or like, no matter where he goes, someone will always say whatever, like whatever stereotype is similar to that from whatever part of the world they're from. So it's always interesting to hear that kind of thing. But it is cool to see that, and I like your perspective on it, how, we're trying to move away from the old world and what the old thoughts were, this old thought process, and we're trying to bring things into modern times. And everybody is on more equal setting, essentially. Everybody's on more equal footing.
Absolutely, and that's what I think the showrunners are trying to do. They're trying to kind of, out with the old, in with the new, and we can't go back to how it was, because we're living in different times now, and how things were back then were a little bit questionable, and we don't want to do that on our show, and we just want to create a safe space for everybody. Whether you're on the show or watching the show, we want you to feel included. I love the makeup, and with all that stuff said, I think we should just like stick to what we got.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Now, when I've spoken to a lot of folks who have done parts that are with heavy prosthetics, they usually tell me about the first time they see the character, and I guess really the kind of the first time that the character connects with them. So for
Mhm.
you, first time you're seeing this character, and again, we know that you're not really a big Trekkie, but you do have a kind of fondness or affinity for the Ferengi type of characters. So the first time you see this makeup, and the first time you put it on, what goes through your head?
All kinds of things. It's when you first put like the appliance on, it's kind of, that's your whoa moment. You know what I mean? And then once you get like the rest of the makeup on, and for me as an actor, like I can't get into it until like I have the whole ensemble on. So I need to have the wardrobe, the makeup, the prosthetics. I need to have all of it on, and like I try to make sure All the Ferengis that I play are different.
All right. Now, we mentioned Doug Jones a little bit earlier in this interview here, and I'm curious to know, well, first of all, had you ever really had any time spent with him on other shows? And did you get a chance to interact with him at all during Discovery?
I have not. I know that, like, again, like Doug's a fucking superstar when it comes to prosthetics. Like, he's the king. I have not worked on him with him on other shows before, even though I know now that he's been on dozens of shows that I've already been on. But we just didn't connect. But like, I was a big Hocus Pocus fan growing up in my household.
Yeah, who
So,
isn't?
you know, having, Billy Butcherson right next to me when I'm getting my makeup done, that's like the coolest feeling in the world. And Doug is such a sweetheart. Like, he's probably the sweetest guy in the world.
And I'm surprised, like, you being such a big horror fan, you weren't like nerding out and trying to run up to him and get an autograph or something between takes. Because I mean, the dude he's a creature from the shape of water. He's like everything scary in Guillermo del Toro's movies. I mean, the dude is amazing.
Yeah, he's well, I've been in this industry now for almost 10 years. Scary. So I think the novelty of being around public figures wears off over time. And like, at the end of the day, they're just trying to do their job. And there's a time and place for that. And so, like, if Doug's in the makeup chair, I try not to disturb him, because I know that's his time, his me time, just to kind of like mellow out before he has this long day. And it really is, like, when you're on set, it's really like you're doing like 12, 14-hour days. And like, I can imagine him, wearing those huge platform shoes all day, and like, just like, being in that makeup and wearing the contact lenses. It's a lot. And so, like, I just, if he addresses me, then I'll talk to him. And he has, like, he's like, said, "Hi, Anthony, you're, and complimented me on all my, like, on my Ferenginess and stuff like that." And we talked, a little bit here and there. And also, like, when you're on set, you really don't have a lot of time to, have those little conversations with, like, everybody else, because it's such a fast-paced set. But you do have, like, those rare moments in between when you kind of, like, have a little conversation here and there. And yeah.
So, Anthony, we made it this far in this interview, and we're talking so much about your makeup and your prosthetics, but let's give some credit where credit is due here. So, can you tell us the names of the folks who work on you on Star Trek?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. Nicola, Rocky, Adrian, Christopher, Larissa, from the wardrobe department, Gersha, Eob, Melanie, Bianca, Heather. And I know that there's a ton of other people that I'm missing there. So if you're watching, I'm sorry, but just know that I'm thinking of you, and you all kick ass. And really, like, the devil works hard, but the wardrobe and makeup department over at Star Trek Discovery work harder.
So yeah, shout out to all those wonderful folks for doing such a fine job and bringing back the Ferengis. But Anthony, I gotta also ask you, and I got inspired to ask you this question because I was looking at your headshot and I was like, this man's face is immaculate, and yet his career is like mostly doing heavy makeup and prosthetics. He's having glue on his face. So I just want to know, like, what is your skincare routine to protect yourself from not having all the burns and all the chemical stuff on it, and still looking pretty much flawless?
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's a combination of a good skincare routine, jeans, and drinking lots of water. That's definitely mine. Like, I don't drink any pops. I don't hardly drink any juices. If I'll drink, of course, like the coffee and the tea here and there, but primarily what I drink during the day is water. Great thing for your skin. Recommended. Drink as much water as you can. And also, like, there hasn't been like any acne prone people in my family, so that's a big plus. And a good skin routine, exfoliate, moisturize, especially if you're in a climate that's very cold. Heavy moisturizer, definitely. In the summer, wear your sunblock with lots of SPF in it. Do what you can to protect your skin, because you only have one.
And since we're talking about giving credit where credit is due, do you want to shout out any brands that you particularly use or any products that you really recommend or like?
Not particularly. I actually, my grandfather and my mother used to wear Noxzema. So honestly, that's a great cleanser in the morning, like just to get all of like that excess oil. Like I said, like after a day from set, like going into a boiling hot shower and getting all that stuff off is just like that's the key to getting all that stuff off.
So I imagine on a Star Trek set you are surrounded by a lot of folks who are pretty deep in the lore. I mean, there's a lot of folks who might not be as crazy as my audience, but again, you are the first Ferengi that's on the set of Discovery. So for the first time that you're walking around in the full makeup, how are people reacting to seeing this new version of the Ferengi?
It's not necessary. I've never heard anybody like come up to me and say, "Whoa, that's a crazy makeup or mask," or that's I don't like the way that looks. Everybody, it's always been the same. Everybody's been like, "Oh, we have a Ferengi this season." So it seems like everybody was just as surprised as the audience when I walked on set, and just it's a great, like, once you're on set and once you get that familiarity going, they're like, "Oh, there's Anthony. He's back again."
So something that has been universal among anybody who I talked to who has been on Discovery is that they say it's like the best set they've ever worked on. Does that statement ring true for you as well?
I worked on a lot of sets, and Star Trek Discovery is definitely one of the heavy hitters, and as far as the details and everything, and like they have actual working doors that slide, and like especially like in that lounge, it's absolutely gorgeous. I know that I would go to that club every night if I had the chance. And you have like live fires on set, and like it's amazing, and they handle everything with care.
Now, again, we know that you're not like a super duper hardcore Trekkie in any way whatsoever, but I mean, did you feel any more, I guess, interest in the Star Trek franchise now that you've become a deeper part of it, and especially because you are the first Starfleet Ferengi in live action Trek in, like, well, really since Nog and Deep Space Nine. So, it's kind of a big deal, and I imagine it's kind of a big responsibility too, whether you're aware or not. Like, to the fans, it's a big deal, and you're really embodying this Ferengi in this new modern world. So, have you felt more interested in the Star Trek universe? Did you go back and watch any more DS9 before you did the part? Has this basically made you a fan?
I wouldn't say a fan, but I would say like after my encounters with the wardrobe department, who was like giving me all this information about all the Ferengis, I would go back and watch like they would tell me about what episode is really Ferengi heavy based, and I would go back and I would watch some of that, and I thought it was really hilarious. Like it's with Quark and Nog, I'm like I'm probably like a deep descendant of them, so like it's pretty cool to like have that in my head. And it's and I'm slowly trying to learn the rules of acquisition just in case they ask me in any way. It's a little tough, but I'm getting there.
I think my favorite rule of acquisition is what's mine is mine, and what's yours is mine too. That's a good one to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's actually one of the first ones I did learn.
Nice.
Yeah, so yeah, I wouldn't say like I'm a fan, but I do say that I have respect for the character more now than I did back then, for sure.
Well, that's great to hear, and I'm so excited to see Ferengi's back in Star Trek. So it's so cool, and I really hope we get to see a lot more of them in season 5 and beyond, and hopefully a lot of them are going to still be Anthony Lake, because that'll be awesome. Keep it up.
Well, I mean, like from what I've been hearing, I don't know if I'm going to be on it, but I know that they really like me. So if they do want the Ferengi back, chances are I will be one of them, or the one.
Well, rub your lobes for good luck, but don't do that on camera. I don't want to get demonetized.
Like, and give me a flippin' line or two, would you?
Yeah.
Like my idea is like having like all the characters come to the bar needing some much needed and sarcastic advice, and I just give it to them. That would be my ideal Ferengi scenario.
Well, I hope you don't mind eating bugs, because their food of choice is tube worms, so get used to that.
That sounds delicious. What are you talking about?
I'm not even going to touch that one. But you know what, Anthony, I mean, something else I want to talk to you about as well right now, and make sure we also plug it to our audience today, is you have a YouTube channel, which I think is criminally underviewed. You have a channel called SAS for Cinema. I got to check out some of the videos before we did this interview, and they're a lot of fun. So just, real quick, plug it, tell us what the channel is all about.
Okay, so I started this YouTube channel called SAS for Cinema back in 2018. And my idea was my love for the 80s and 90s was to take movies that I loved and essentially beat them down. And then, life stuff got in the way, and, my acting started to be more on the front burner. So I paid more attention to that. And so after I did, 12 episodes, I kind of like put that on the back burner, and I'm eventually going to get back into it for sure, but right now I'm just I'm laying in wait, as they say, because my agent has been informing me that this year is going to be pretty busy for as terms of like auditions and movies and shows and stuff.
Well, I think that sounds like a good idea, though. I mean, it's better to be busy than not busy, right? So, I mean, hopefully one of these days you get back to the channel, but it's always going to be there. That's the good news about it.
Well, that's the thing with YouTube. Like it's never going to go away no matter what. So I know that I can always pick up where I left off for sure.
And if folks who haven't seen it want to know more about it, I mean, yeah, there's some horror stuff on it, but I think the last one you did was actually Showgirls, and that one's hilarious. So if you want to see someone tear apart Showgirls, which is like always a fun thing to do, go ahead, check out Sass for Cinema on YouTube.
Thank you. And that's got to be one of my favorite horror movies of all time, Showgirls.
It is frightening.
It is awful.
So Anthony, as we come to towards the end here of this interview, I wanted to ask you, what is the best piece of advice, either personally or professionally, that you've ever gotten from someone else that you still use to this day?
Don't take advice from anybody. Everybody's gonna have their opinions, no matter what. Opinions are assholes. Everybody's got one. But just my best advice from me, other than not taking my advice, is just do you. Everybody's gonna, no matter what path you're gonna be on, you're eventually gonna get there. It might take a little longer, but eventually you're gonna get there. Just as long as you don't pay attention to all those little other flowers in the garden. You're the one that's blooming. So just pay attention to you. That's it.
All right. So Anthony, for folks out there who would like to follow you on social media, how can they go ahead and do that?
You can follow me on Instagram at the Anthony Lake. I am not on Twitter yet, but I will eventually get there.
So Anthony, again, thank you so much for being here. It's really cool to be able to meet the newest Ferengi joining the family, because that's really what it is now. I mean, you're part of the Ferengi family. That's kind of a big deal to Star Trek fans. So I'm glad to hear that it's also kind of giving you a little more respect for the series too. It's great to hear, and it's good to know it's in the hands of someone who really does appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, I know that I was coming in to this whole universe pretty blind, but like a lot of people, they eventually, learn to have a respect for the individual that they're playing. And it's been honestly a great opportunity. And every time I've been on set, it's just been amazing, and just like being with the cast as well. It's just, at least I haven't seen, there hasn't been any divas or anything like that. Everybody has been so amazing, and Saniqua's been so uplifting, and Doug's been a sweetheart, and just everybody has been really welcoming.
Well, that's great to hear. So hopefully we do, like I said, we get to see you back here in season 5 and many, many more, because we need more Ferengi, and yeah, we need to get more paychecks for Anthony Lake. So let's make that happen. And everybody can make sure to follow Anthony on Instagram. Be forewarned, you're going to be seeing a lot of his butt on there, but hey, it's not a bad thing to see.
Well, I mean, the sun doesn't shine, but my butt does.
I'm not going there. Good night, America.
I live in Canada in the winter, so the sun hasn't been shining. But if you would like a sun, feel free to follow me.
I think it's a full moon we're getting from your Instagrams.
Well, there you go. I am a vampire also, so I do like the night.
That is true. That is true. Well, Anthony, thank you so much for being here with us today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
That's it for this week's episode of Trek Untold. Until next time, please don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you're in a position to financially support the show, please consider becoming a supporter over on patreon.com/trekuntold, or pick up some merchandise from our Redbubble store. If you're looking for direct links for any of these things, links will be right in the show notes. If you have any questions or comments for the show, or would like to suggest a guest, or discuss any sponsorship ideas with us, send me a message at trekuntold@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to Trek Untold and for continuing to support this show. I hope you'll come back next time to learn more stories about Star Trek and beyond. Until then, I'm Matthew Kaplowitz, and always remember, fortune favors the bold.
Trek Untold is sponsored by TrekSphere.com, promoting fan-produced Star Trek content in all forms, is powered by the RageWorks Podcasting Network, and is affiliated with Nerd News Today.